Okay, good morning, Chevra. Let's get started. So, yesterday the Imrei Yaakov made reference to a second Tosfos which we hadn't seen. I want us to refer back to there's two identical Gemaras, one in Bava Metzia on Daf Lamed Gimel, and one in Pesachim on page Kuf Yud Gimel. And the two Gemaras say under what conditions is it permitted to have hatred towards a fellow Jew? And so the Gemara answers that we're talking about a situation where I saw a person committing an Aveira, a treacherous thing. I cannot incriminate him in Beis Din because I'm a sole witness, but still there's a mitzvah for me to bear him malice because of his treacherous behavior. And we had said that it seems to be that it's referring to treacherous behavior towards God, not towards me in particular, because there, of course, I have an obligation to remove the hatred from my heart, but against Hashem. Now, in both of those Gemaras, both in Bava Metzia and Pesachim, there's a commentary of Tosfos, and we saw the commentary of Tosfos in Bava Metzia, but we didn't see the commentary of the Tosfos in Pesachim. In Bava Metzia, Tosfos asks, well, what about this halacha that we learned the last couple of days, that if I have two opportunities to do the mitzvah of prika or te'ina, but one is for the animal of my friend and one is for the animal of my enemy, that I should specifically choose to do first the animal of my enemy. Let me just close my door, I'm sorry. I should specifically choose the animal of my enemy so that it'll help me in my character development. Why should I develop character to suppress my hatred towards a Jew that I have a mitzvah to hate? So Tosfos in Bava Metzia answered the question by saying that there are two types of hatred. One is justifiable hatred, and one is not justified hatred. So for the justifiable hatred, you don't have any obligation to go attend to the guy that you justifiably hate because he's a sinner. But what the Gemara was talking about, where you should develop your character to suppress your hatred and your anger against the guy, is where where you're not justified in your hatred. He's not a sinner, he's just a nudnik, and you just don't like him. So that's where the Gemara says that you have an obligation to suppress your own negative feelings towards the person and do the mitzvah for him first. But there's actually a second Tosfos, which we'll see now. And this is a Tosfos in Pesachim. I hope you can see the screen on my page. Shera abo devar erva, that when you see a person possessing a negative trait, then you are allowed to hate them. And there's a mitzvah, actually, it says the Gemara, to hate them. V'im tomar, but 1 second, says Tosfos, de be'elu mitzias, amrinan, or daf lamed beis, I should say, amrinan ohev lifrok v'sonei liton mitzvah b'sonei kedei lachufis yitzro. He says, Tosfos says, well, why does the Gemara over there say that you should suppress your hatred and do character development by specifically attending to the animal of your enemy first? V'hashda makfias yetzer shayich kevin de mitzvah l'sanoso. Why is there a suppression of your anger or your hatred? Why are you supposed to overcome that if there's a mitzvah to hate him? So Tosfos gives a unique answer over here, a different answer. He says, V'yesh lomar, keven shuhu sona'o, gam chavero soneo so. He says, since I bear malice to him, if let's say I see Reuven committing a sin, I have a mitzvah to hate him, correct? Yes. But I have a mitzvah to hate him internally. But what's going to happen if I confront him with that hatred? So then what's going to happen? He's going to have hatred towards me as well. Why? Because that's human nature. We hate the people who hate us. You hate me, I hate you even more. Right? Dichsiv, as it says in Proverbs, Kemayim hapanim lepanim, Kain Lev Ha'adam La'adam. It's one of the most profound verses in all of Tanakh. That just like when you look in the water, you see a reflection of yourself, you see your face looking back at you, so too, whenever you look into a person's face, you see a reflection of that person's feelings towards you. So when a person looks in my face, if he confronts anger and malice, he's immediately going to have that emotional response towards me, which, by the way, it's often used in the opposite. If I look at a person with love, then the person will love me back. And we learn from this pasuk that the best way to gain friends is not through fast talking and trying to compliment a person. The best way to gain friends is to show true friendship, is to genuinely love another human being, and that love will reflect back upon you. So, but it works both ways, right? So Tosfos basically says, "Uboin mitoch kach lidei sina gemura," and therefore that will bring to a complete hatred. In other words, my hatred for this person only extends to his behavior. Tosfos seems to imply, when the Torah says that I'm supposed to hate the sinner, it's the sin that I hate, but not the sinner. I'm not seeking his utter destruction or anything like that. And so if I'm confronted with this person and I don't suppress my hatred at that moment when I'm confronting him, then he will detect that hatred, he will reflect it back at me, and there will be a constant feeding into a spiraling out of control hatred, because we'll bounce off of each other, and then that hatred will intensify, and therefore you have to suppress the Yetzer Hara. So what Tosfos seems to suggest is that hatred based on sinfulness will spiral out of control, and therefore you have an obligation that when you confront that individual, you've got to do something to try and temper it in any way that you can. That doesn't mean that you don't have to stop hating him. If anything, there's still a mitzvah to have hatred towards his behavior, but you're not allowed to allow that hatred to spiral out of control to, not only do I hate the fact that he eats cheeseburgers, but he's a nasty guy, and he's got ugly kids, and he's got an ugly car, and I hate everything about him, and his clothes, and right? It's going to get totally out of control, right? So that's the reason why, even where there's a mitzvah to hate a person, you still have a mitzvah to suppress your anger when when you have that confrontation with him. Okay, so based on that, the Imrei Yaakov says that this distinction that was made by the Rav Shulchan Aruch in our discussion, that it depends whether the hatred is justified or not, the Imrei Yaakov says that according to the Bach is a commentary on the Tur Shulchan Aruch, and the Bach actually quotes this Tosfos, and based upon that, and this is where we are in our text in the Imrei Yaakov. Let's see. He says, "V'das habach de ha'ikar hu kedivrei haTosfos psachim." He says, and therefore, which we just read, and therefore, if we paskin like this Tosfos, then even when he's a justifiable enemy, because he's a sinner, I still have a mitzvah to go ahead and attend to his donkey first, so that I can suppress that anger when we are face to face. Okay? And I just want to point out one other thing. The Rav Shulchan Aruch does seem to have more tolerance for hatred than other commentaries do. In other words, the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said that the only time that you are not allowed to hate someone is if he offended you personally on some monetary issue. But if he insulted you, You're not obligated to remove, or he humiliated you. He put something on his social media to disparage you. You're not obligated to remove the hatred from your heart. That's a very controversial stance. But I wanted to show you in the Rab, because he makes reference, he says, Kamoshen Isbar Ba'or Chaim Simin Kuf Nun Vav, as has been explained in another section in Shulchan Aruch, in Orach Chaim, in Simin Kuf Nun Vav. Now, let me just point out to you what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is talking about over there. The Rav Shulchan Aruch has, first of all, it's important to know that you know that the section of Shulchan Aruch that is studied most widely is Orach Chaim. We are studying now Choshen Mishpat, but the more prevalent section of Shulchan Aruch that is studied is called Orach Chaim, the path of life, and it is the section of Shulchan Aruch that contains the laws of rising in the morning, tzitzis, netilat yadayim, prayer, brachos, birkat hamazon, davening mincha, ma'ariv, Shabbos observance, Yontif observance. It's got these standard practices of how a Jew is supposed to comport himself on a daily basis. That's why it's called Orach Chaim, the path of life, because it sort of basically gives you step-by-step instructions about how you're supposed to go through your daily ritual observance. Okay? And that's why there's the most commentary on that section of Shulchan Aruch. And that's, for example, Mishnah Brura is exclusively on Orach Chaim. There's no Mishnah Brura on any other section of the Shulchan Aruch. Choshen Mishpat is how to comport yourself in financial dealings and in other respects having to do with Bein Adam Lechavero, interpersonal relationships, which is what we're studying now, but it's not the ritual aspects of Judaism. Okay? Now, the Rav Shulchan, there's a section of Orach Chaim which is almost Choshen Mishpat-like in its nature. It's Simin Kuf Nun Vav, it's chapter 156 of Orach Chaim, and it's a very short section of Shulchan Aruch because basically it says that it deals with the section of your day which time-wise is the most amount of your day, but from a ritualistic standpoint, it involves very little halachic observance. So therefore, it's the part of your day where you finish davening, you woke up in the morning, you said all your brachos, you did all your rituals in the morning, you davened, you went to the Beis Medrash and you learned, and Siman Kuf Nun Vav then says, after you finish davening and studying Torah, you should go engage in a reputable business endeavor and spend your day doing the right thing. So a lot of commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch on Siman Kuf Nun Vav, here basically, if you want to just take a look, Seder Masa Umatan, it's one short paragraph. Achar kach yelech la'asakav, after you finish all of the rituals of the morning, take care of your affairs. Why? D'chol Torah she'ein ima melacha sofa b'tela v'goreres avam. Because if you just observe rituals all day without going to work, you won't make any money, and any life of Judaism which involves not making money is eventually going to cause a person to sin, because work is productive, work is satisfying, work is gratifying, and if you don't work over the course of the day, you're eventually going to lose all your Torah and it's going to cause you to sin. Ki ha'oni ya'avirenu al da'as kona, because poverty will lead you to rebel against your Creator. And then he says, but while it's true that you have to go to work, your main objective in living should not be your work. Don't work to live, but don't live to work, but rather work in order that you can live and you can be a pious Jew, right? And it says over the course of the day, you should deal faithfully with anyone who you do business with. Make sure that you don't take the Lord's name in vain when you get upset. You make sure you don't take gratuitous oaths or vows, and don't be careful about who you enter into partnership with, and etc. etc. So that's the entire sif, and then the next sif launches into the laws of eating your meals and making blessings on meals and the grace before meals and the grace after meals. Okay, but that's the entire section in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim that deals with the mainstay of your day, is the time after you leave shul to the time that you get home, right, from work, right? Even though that's the bulk of your work day, it's the time that takes the most amount of time. It's the smallest amount of space that's devoted to in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. But really, what is supposed to happen is that when you close your Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim to go to work, you have to mentally open up your Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat to know how to comport yourself for the rest of the day. Okay? But in this section, there's a number of commentaries on Shulchan Aruch, one of them being the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is what we're studying now in Choshen Mishpat, and he takes this opportunity to expand upon ethical conduct over the day in this section of Shulchan Aruch. So let me just show you what he says. He's got a much lengthier commentary, as you can see by my scrolling through. He's got 21 paragraphs instead of just one paragraph. But and he talks about many things like anger and haughtiness and speaking lashon hara. He uses this chapter in Orach Chaim to encapsulate all of the things that a person should be thinking about over the course of his day when I have interactions with other people. So, in the third paragraph, he talks about the evils of haughtiness, he talks about the evils of anger, and then he says as follows: V'im hu talmid chacham, if a person is a Torah scholar, v'chirfo ubizehu echad meha'am, and someone goes ahead and insults you, hu lo yashiv al chirpasa, you're not supposed to engage in a fight with this guy. If a guy calls you a name, don't call him back. A Talmud Chacham is silent. A Talmud Chacham knows when to keep quiet. He doesn't escalate the conflict. He just takes it and walks away. The person who insulted him will have to bear the sin of having disgraced a Torah scholar. V'im yavo acher linkom nikmaso b'kiyum hamishpat yishtok v'lo yimche biyado. And therefore, if someone else wishes to take up your fight for you, you're not obligated to stop them. In other words, if a guy calls you out and publicly insults you, you should remain quiet because you're a Torah scholar. But if someone wishes to come to your aid and exonerate you, then you don't have to stop them. If he wants to enter into the fray, you don't have to protest. Ve'alzeh amru kol talmid chacham she'ino nokem v'noter kenachash eino talmid chacham hoil ve'ein torato chashuva be'einav. He says, and about this, the rabbis say that if you're a Torah scholar and you don't take adequate measures to properly take vengeance and avenge the disgrace to Torah, you're not truly a scholar. Because if you don't show concern about avenging the dishonor, the disgrace shown to your scholarship, ve'eno makpid al bizyona, you're showing that it doesn't matter to you that your stature is being disgraced, and it's really not your stature, it's the Torah stature. Umikol makom imefaisim oto tzarich lihitpayes miyad. But if a person apologizes, once he apologizes, you have to accept their apology. In other words, number one, don't escalate the conflict. If someone else wants to get involved and take up your cause, you can allow them to do so. But as soon as the guy apologizes, immediately accept the apology. Because through that apology, the disgrace to the Torah is also rectified. Ve'alzeh amru kol hamavir al midosav umochel lemisha mefayiso Ma'avirin lo al kol pishav. And about this, our sages say that if you are foregoing on your feelings and you immediately forgive anyone who apologizes, then God will be foregoing and forgiving to you. V'chol zeh, excuse me, v'chol zeh b'tzar haguf, aval b'davar shebemomenim talmud chacham asur litor belibo ve'en tzarach lomar linkom. But all of the aforementioned is when a person is personally insulted. But let's say a Talmud Chacham is not insulted, is not embarrassed, is not called out by someone, but rather someone takes financial advantage of him, and there's nothing that I can do. So if I'm a Torah scholar, I have to just swallow that and remove all anger. Okay, the guy took advantage of me financially, but what's done is done. I'm not allowed to harbor any malice or any hatred whatsoever. The implication of what he's written over here is that for a Torah scholar, there is a dispensation for a person to be upset at another individual for having insulted him, because your justification is based on the fact that you're a Torah scholar. And therefore you're allowed to harbor malice towards a person who disgraces your Torah. Okay? So, as such, it was based on this that the Rav Shulchan Aruch over here in Imrei Yaakov, in Choshen Mishpat, wanted to argue. Let me just. He wanted to argue that there is sometimes justifiable hatred if someone insults you, and you're allowed to harbor malice towards them. However, here, so the Imrei Yaakov has said two things. Number one, there's never a time when you're not obligated to suppress your Yetzer Hara when you confront a person. That's according to the Bach, based on the Tosfos and Psachim that we just saw. But number two, even if you're going to go like the other Tosfos in Bava Metzia, that there is no mitzvah to help someone who is an enemy of yours because they're a sinner, because there's no character refinement necessary in that case. But even according to that, we still have to disagree with the Rav Shulchan Aruch in the area of when is hatred considered justifiable. So for one thing, hatred is justifiable if a person is a covert sinner, then hatred is justifiable. But the Rav Shulchan Aruch says that not only is it justifiable when he's a covert sinner against God, but even when he's insulted you, and you're a Torah scholar. So he says, Aval das hasma de betzar haguf kagon sheiknito va'asa imo davar shelo kahogin bazeh yesh kein mitzvah lachuf yitzra. The Sma, who's the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch itself, disagrees and says that any time there's a personal offense, then you're not supposed to harbor that malice. You still have a mitzvah to try to suppress that, and you have to get over it. Kevin shehu davar shebein adam lechavero ve'ein mitzvah lisanoso. He says anytime it's bein adam lechavero, it's between man and man, there is no mitzvah to hate a person because he's not nice to people, including if he's not nice to me. Okay? And even if he insults my wife or he insults one of my kids, I still do not have a right to hate him. There's no mitzvah for me to hate this person. V'davka heicha da'avid isura ba'avera shebein adam l'makom az ein tzarach lichpos yitzro da'az mitzvah l'sanosa. He says it's only in a scenario where he commits an bein adam lamakom, where he commits sins between himself and God, and he wants to be accepted within the religious community, but you know that he's leading a double life, like we talked about before, and he's doing horrible things. So then you don't have to suppress your anger and your hatred towards that guy. Only then is there a mitzvah to despise him for his criminal behavior. And va'ayin biurim sheherachnu bazeh v'hisaknu dechein ro'ui lahachmir. And I refer you to this long biurim that I told you. He goes through this long, 2 long pages like this, right? He says we should be machmir like the Sma. In this respect, we're not going to paskin like the Rav Shulchan Aruch, who allows us to continue letting our hatred to simmer in a case where a person insults a Talmud Chacham. If I feel that I'm a Talmud Chacham, I'm allowed to let that hatred simmer. Okay? So, bottom line is that hatred is never good. Hatred is never good because it does more damage to the hater than to the hatee. When is the only time that we can sanction hatred towards a person? When he is caustic towards our faith, when he's caustic towards God. And as I mentioned before, we're not talking about a person who is not religious. We're talking about a person who professes to be religious, but is leading a double life. That's the only application that I can find justifiable in our current times. Questions, comments?
Yeah, Rabbi.
Yes, Ron.
Something that probably affects almost all of us because we're the type of society we're living in, and all the more so for myself, who was in an industry we're dealing with a lot of gay people. So many of us know people like that. Many of us may know people who are in the religious community who are like that. So my understanding is that we should accept and love the person, but not accept the act. But how are we supposed to show our hatred towards that they understand that we don't accept this?
That's a very good question. Let me just start off by saying that the society in which we live with, has taken a completely contrary position to homosexuality in general. And not only does it say that there's nothing wrong, like that's from that Seinfeld episode, not that there's anything wrong with that. Society, that was from the 90s. We are now a generation later. And society today says not only is there nothing wrong with that, but there's something wrong with you if you feel there's anything wrong with that. And so society condemns any kind of person who takes a biblical position on homosexuality. So the tables really have turned on people who harbor those very traditional values. But so therefore, what does that translate to? First of all, any person who finds himself being gay may not even realize that what they're doing is wrong. That's number one. And even a person that was brought up Orthodox, there are so many people even within the Orthodox community who are trying to offer cover and sanctuary for people who engage in homosexual behavior. They tell them it's not your fault, and they tell them, that you have to do what you have to do, and so forth and so on. So I don't, and furthermore, let me just take that one step further. There are people who genuinely wish to be close to God, but find themselves psychologically unable to break themselves free from their homosexual tendencies. And as such, if a person is very transparent about it and expresses a regret that they wish that this was not part of who they were, but they really feel that they have no choice. And like we learned before, a person who is a sinner l'tei avon, that he sins because of a weakness, is a type of person who you're allowed to hate, but at the same time you have to try and according to the Tosfos that we just learned, you have to try and suppress that. You have to try and suppress that also when you have an encounter with them. So it seems from Tosfos, the reason for the hatred stems from their behavior. Can I hate the person because of their behavior? Yes. Can I hate the person for other reasons? No. You cannot allow the hatred to spiral out of control. So, there's nothing that you should be doing to express your displeasure, because you will become the pariah. You will become the bad guy in society's eyes. If the person expresses to you tremendous regret and a desire to, I wish I wasn't like this, and I wish I could break free from this, so then you try to help them as much as you can. But if they're not interested, this is the lifestyle that they've chosen for themselves, and this is what they genuinely want in their life, and this is what they feel is the key to their happiness. So fine, listen, you're still a Jew, you're still a human being. I'm supposed to have complete contempt for your behavior, but that I'm not going to show that hatred to you, because by displaying hatred, it's going to spiral out of control. So I have to show you love instead. So I'm going to show you love instead, and there's a part of me that does love you for being a holy Yid, but at the same time I have contempt for your behavior. I think that's what we have to conclude. Love the sinner, hate the sin, love the sinner. I think that's what we have to conclude. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today. We'll move on to our next halacha, and we will pick it up tomorrow. Okay, take care, everyone.